Greetings, Internet! Welcome to another fabulous, fun-filled episode of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer. With me, as always, is my trusty sidekick, Nicholas Osborne. With us this week, Professor Cody White, because mighty Mike Eakins is slumming with his family or something. And we have a special guest from the Comic Watch family with us, introducing to you all Lillian Hawkwinder. They are from the UK and pretty much
actually from the US. I just have a really bad habit of disappearing over there and then coming back over here.
You have an astonishing approximation of a UK accent, my friend. But they are the Genderfluid Loki evangelist of Comic Watch, and we are very happy to have them joining us because we are talking about Loki and the MCU and Black Widow this week. Black Widow dropped week before last. Loki just wrapped up. Seemed like a good time to check in on the MCU and just kind of take the temperature of the state of things. What did we think? What's happening moving forward? Did Taskmaster lose the vocal cords or something? Who knows? So let's start with Loki, which just wrapped, obviously. It goes without saying, major spoilers are in effect. So if you have not seen Black Widow, if you've not seen Loki through season 6, we're going to spoil it for you. And so you should...
Wow, were there a whole 5 seasons when I was...
Yes, you should probably pause this, go do those things, and then come back, unless you just don't care about spoilers. So, Loki was a show. Disney Plus. Tom Hiddleston, absolutely, as per usual, crushed it in the role of Loki. Let's just dive in, and I don't want this to just turn into like a massive fading of Mr. Hiddleston, but I mean the guy just perfectly embodies the role.
Chef's kiss.
Sorry.
Just chef's kiss.
Absolutely. Dude has been Loki, like just body and soul for the last, I can't believe I'm saying this, 10 years now. But
you can see that he really just threw himself entirely into it and just went, yep, just going to become a complete scholar on this, and then just emote a whole lot at the camera constantly. And I'm here for it.
I'm fine with that. I've seen other movies with Mr. Hiddleston, and they're okay, but nothing to get excited about.
Come on, Crimson Peak. We don't need to get on this right now, right?
Are we going to do Crimson Peak? We can do Crimson Peak, but it's not the best movie.
Lovers Left
It's not a bad movie. And it's not Tom Hiddleston's fault.
Oh, I have a large Crimson Peak poster on the other wall, but no.
Okay. Well, maybe I stand corrected.
The ghost story with the...
Yes, it is. The Guillermo del Toro.
That movie was all right.
Yeah. I think people got disappointed in it because it kept getting marketed as a horror movie, which Del Toro was of the opinion of, it isn't. Please stop calling it that.
Word.
But Loki, right? That's what we're talking about. Don't get me started on Crimson Peak, right?
Yeah.
Loki is what brings us all here, but we got to get Lillian's thoughts on this. Like, this is what I'm here for, honestly.
Oh goodness, I have a vast array of them. I'm trying to work on the good place to start, and I'm not actually sure that I'm very good at starting somewhere. I have very mixed feelings on how the ending worked, I will say, because I think it was an incredibly character-driven show, and I think it did, honestly, a pretty beautiful job of doing that quite a lot of the time. And I think Tom Hiddleston has a really good job because he has a stage background, so does really well with sort of intimate character-driven stuff, which I think this gave him a lot to do with that. Yeah. But the ending, basically, to me, was saying, anyway, forget about that guy. And here is the new big bad for Phase 4. Everybody give a round to.
I feel like you're onto something there. And I think just maybe all of the internet agrees with you. Because the finale And I mean, we can get into the broader narrative structure of the show and kind of some of its peaks and valleys as we go. I'm sure Cody has some insightful things to say about that. But that ending is 45 minutes of exposition dump / setting up the big bad of Phase 4 for the MCU and very little Loki.
Yep.
And to top it off, it doesn't really feel like it concluded anything.
No. It felt like, on the one hand, like there were definitely hints of sort of the idea of free will, and there were like moments where it did a nice job of mirroring the conversation with Mobius at the start of the show. I personally had no issue with it being a conversation piece, as
Yes.
I thought that mirroring was nice. But the way that it basically went, by the way, shall we just talk about everything that is going to be going on with Phase 4? Here's Immortus.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see him, folks. Yeah, basically just went, here's more exposition, and did a thing that I think Marvel has started falling into a habit of doing, of saying, here's something that you will get later. Instead of the thing that you get now, here's all of the stuff you will be getting later, so be excited about that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And it's
currently happening.
It's something that, I mean, it's been a problem here and there throughout pretty much the existence of the MCU. You know, Age of Ultron is probably the biggest offender of subverting its own narrative in order to shamelessly plug upcoming events. That was that, but this was literally the entire narrative of the show being diverted and subverted to set up Kang. And I'm fine with setting up Kang, but I think it could have been done in a more graceful way with, like you were saying, a conversation about free will. You know, you can thread these things together. You've clearly got clever writers on this show, right?
Right. Yeah, there's sort of this really odd thing where it's also a case to me where the characters that are in the show, they do not care who Kang is or who he is, other than controls things. Generally, though, it's just, we don't know who you are. Who are you? We must now explain who you are for a while. Except also not really, because otherwise Jonathan Majors would have to press things, yes, I am appearing as Kang in Loki, which he was able to go, not to my awareness, I'm not, because he didn't.
I love that idea, though, that they introduced a Kang, but not Kang the Conqueror.
No.
Right? That was very well played, because my first instinct was, oh, this is going to be their interpretation of Kang. But let's be honest, Jonathan Majors is a great actor. He mugged a lot for the camera.
Yeah.
Watch that spread over the next 15 movies in the Marvel Universe.
Like,
I mean, it was total Gene Wilder.
I feel like he chewed the scenery enough when there was no scenery, and I'm just like, all right, I would allow you to do this for a while longer. But
Cody, you were fixing to make a very astute comparison, I think.
Yeah. I felt like Jonathan Majors was brilliantly channeling like Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka, like that.
The whole man behind the curtain thing, right? It's Wizard of Oz too.
Right. I thought that was beautiful. That was brilliant. That was probably the best thing about the whole episode. But I wanted to circle back on something that you said, Matt, where you said that this whole thing diverts itself into setting up the next big bad in Kang. One, I don't think Kang's the next big bad. I think he's going to be bad. I don't think he's the big bad. I don't know who the big bad is, but I can't imagine it being Kang the Conqueror. Like, if that's the case, then I mean, we're already starting on building our house on sand, right? But more so, this was about setting up the multiverse. The multiverse is the main point of Phase 4. We're hearing all the stuff about Spider-Man. You get the title of Doctor Strange.
Multiverse of Madness.
And what if is our next thing? And what if is entirely an exploration of the multiverse. So, I mean, it feels like the entire purpose of Loki was to establish a multiverse because we know that there isn't one. right? The Ancient One explains it in Endgame how we don't have a universe right now, and now we have one. Ta-da!
And like, I do like having it be multiple Lokis that are fighting over, like, hey, is it bad to give everybody all of these choices, or are choices actually bad for you, and maybe we should just save everyone the trouble? Except that the way that the show is setting it up at the end, there also is much less choice for either of the variants for if they actually want to do what they're doing and how they've come to get there.
Right.
Which is a bit weird. Also, I will make a side note. I'm just making a nice little side note, which is that I think it's very funny that because Loki was sort of the first big bad for the MCU, he kind of gets brought back out when we need to show everyone how scary the next big villain is.
Yeah.
Well, because if
it's the Worf factor.
Are you afraid of Thanos yet? No, how about when he kills Loki?
Then you go, oh wow, this Thanos guy is really sure something.
Right.
Okay, even though Loki's dead, hey, can we bring him back? Because for one, makes good money, and for two, now we can have him go, oh no, this Khan guy is really scary.
Hey, you're not wrong, actually. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but there is a trope called the Worf factor that goes back to Star Trek TNG, where if you wanted to present a bad guy and show how badass they were, he would kick Worf's ass. And it's a pervasive trick, right? If you want to, and you see it all across genre fiction where stuff like this occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's a trope for a reason, and okay. I hadn't thought about it, but I would. Brief sidebar, Cody. I would actually say Thanos was a bigger deal when he beat the shit out of the Hulk, but 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
I mean, he killed a guy. Like, it's one thing to beat up on a Hulk, and it's another.
Yeah, but Hulk beat the shit out of that god.
Yeah,
pretty hilariously too.
But didn't.
There's actually
took a beating.
A little piece of just behind the scenes trivia that I find really fun that does tie into this is everyone might have noticed that Loki just ends up falling a lot or getting thrown a lot, just somehow either on his front or on his back getting up again constantly with the show. And this was literally because apparently in the writer's room, Tom Hiddleston was saying, Loki has a lot of hubris, so if you're ever if you ever just don't have a joke that you should be doing, what you can do, just knock me on my ass. Just throw Loki somewhere. It's fine. Take him down a peg. So he's just getting thrown around constantly the entire show, which is funny if you're going to be the main character of a show and you just go, no, just beat me up constantly. It's fine.
Well, I mean, and kind of going back to the very first episode of Loki, though, this whole series, at least in its elevator pitch, okay, is about tearing Loki down and getting to the core of who he is.
Oh, absolutely.
And he's not really the villain, right? He's this scared person that doesn't have any friends and doesn't know how to make friends, and so he just does all this shit. And it's
one friend. I'm going to be so mad about this for an entire year.
And right, and I mean that's a good elevator pitch, and you see it most effectively in the very first episode when he's watching how his life plays out, and the interplay between Loki and Mobius is rooting for him. Hey, buddy, you've got this. Which is, I wanted more. Like after the first 2 episodes, the Loki-Mobius dynamic kind of just falls to the wayside because now we need to focus on Loki and Sylvie. Loki variant.
Also Enchantress with Sylvie. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was she's an Ersatz Enchantress, and that's okay. I learned to accept these things about the MCU.
I love the dynamic, though.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I really love the dynamic between Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson. I think it's beautiful, but also like that very first episode, I think does so well at doing exposition that doesn't feel like exposition.
Yes.
That it makes all of the exposition in that final episode that much more blatant, and like someone is hitting you over the head going, we're doing exposition, we're doing exposition.
That's a good comparison. I like that.
Because the first one, you do just have basically, what if we did a reaction video for a while, except it's just Loki going, oh no, that's my life. That's my life. What if I don't want that life? But also,
Yeah.
people loved me and I treated them like crap.
I read an interesting theory, and I was hoping they would play this out. But as soon as it was revealed that everyone working at the TVA was a variant in some form or another, what if Mobius is Freya's variant, and that's why he shows that emotional warmth and the "you can do it, buddy, I believe in you" attitude towards Loki? I just think
that is out there.
It's out there, but I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. I mean, clearly there's male to female to alligator variants out there.
Oh, I have an extra batch of thoughts on that, but that would take a while. As I think the show mostly, like, it promised gender fluidity. I can tell you it did not do it.
Right.
And if anything, did very much.
I wanted to ask you about that specifically. Like, there's a line, I feel like it was in the 3rd or 4th episode where...
Episode 5, maybe?
Maybe 5. Have you ever met a female variant?
Yes.
Terrible.
Yes. I wanted to just casually throw myself into the void for a minute. After
like their files, the actual TVA files have Loki as gender fluid.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Y'all really shit the bed on that.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure why that line was there. And it's also here's one fact that I've learned super recently, which is that Kate Herron, the director, said that apparently in episode 2, when you're like not really sure, is this variant that they're chasing a man or a woman? We don't know. One of the ways that they kept audiences guessing was actually by having multiple stunt doubles of different genders that they were switching out throughout the entire episode. So, and it's so close to have then not actually represented gender fluidity when they basically just casually were shapeshifting Sylvie when they were trying to keep the audience in the dark.
I had no idea.
And so essentially, like, because one huge bit of specifically, like, of course, real gender fluid people can't shapeshift, alas, but Loki specifically, for an expression of gender fluidity, goes back and forth between different gender presentations via shapeshifting, which is a thing that the show never does, and then instead goes, here is the man Loki, here is the woman Loki, and now they're in a relationship together. Is that the same thing? No, it isn't the same thing. It is not the same thing. To have a weird rom-com between... like, which, fine, by itself, okay, it's just a bit of the inevitable science fiction question. Would you bang yourself? Would you kiss yourself? Etc. Doctor Who has done this before, but
I would not.
But within the context of basically being told, yes, we are giving you gender fluid representation, and then doing that instead, when they very obviously were making nods to the comics that do it brilliantly, it's, for me, a bit of a sting.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of that whole series that Marvel falls into a lot with these pitfalls, and where they're trying to show some sense of representation, but they're also looking at global markets and what they can pull in certain audiences and what they can show in other audiences and what they can do to create a full piece that will still work with that manipulation. And I think we see that a lot in the MCU and honestly a lot of other like big Hollywood tentpole films. And it's something that I was worried that Loki would do that whenever we saw the brief glimpse of the screenshot of them putting that they were gender fluid. And it felt like something that they were just going to kind of toss out there. So hopefully social media would latch onto it, but they didn't really touch on it too much. I mean, even the bisexual announcement that was huge and like all of the outlets were reporting on and everybody's talking about on social media was like 5 seconds worth of a conversation that it's quickly glossed over, and we're moving on to the next thing.
For me, there was that combination because I'm bi as well. Like I fell into the jackpot for a favorite character, but
we got good bi-lighting, right? I mean, there was that.
I loved the bi-lighting. I was all over the bi-lighting, which also, may I just say, was apparently canonically bi-lighting. Normally, it's just people going, headcanon, it's bi-lighting. But no, DiMartino was on Twitter being like, nice lighting, right? And which suggests, actually, no, it was just completely, we were doing this on purpose. And I think part of the reason that, like, that scene, even though on the one hand it is that just really small thing, where it's just like, I would love to just have more time here, but we're not. On the other hand, though, it's that really nice, just sort of casual thing. And it's treated as something that's just, it's natural. It's a thing that that Loki just assumes is true for every single Loki. And it's also not a thing that the show feels like, oh, we need to question this in terms of identity. It's one of the things that doesn't need to be questioned. Which is also what I think is brilliant with Agent of Asgard, the comic series that this pulled a bit from, which is that Loki's gender fluidity is just never one of the things that is a question, even when all she is doing is questioning identity the entire time. But that is never one of the questions. That is the thing that is certain.
I mean, we can't really get to those questions because now that we know where the series needs to end, if you start that kind of needs to be the end point, because then you're doing a disservice to the story. So whenever you have something like the ending episode needs to basically not just introduce Kang, but also kick off the whole next phase of the MCU, when you have a storyline like that lingering in the background, you can see pretty easily how that would get pushed aside, where you get some lighting and a 5-second dialogue, and then we're kind of moving on.
Right, yeah.
And that's kind of like what I see about this whole series, to kind of go back to our original discussion, is the first season feels like the third issue of a 5-issue arc, if that makes sense, where you're not quite at the penultimate issue where things can start building up to the epic finale, and you're after the excitement of the first issue that's kicking the story off. And we're putting this in the grand scheme of the MCU. There's so much narrative weightlifting done in this one season to get us to that Kang point, that everything else sort of falls by the way, and we're kind of left there. Like, if you just buy issue 3 of a series and you read it, you don't get a lot out of it. But if you remove issue 3 from a trade paperback collection, then you kind of miss a lot. And I felt like it was that scenario where I'm like, I'm into this, I'm into like how we got it going, I'm super into where it's going next, but like just this, I don't want just this, I need everything else around it to make it work. And Marvel seems like they're falling deeper and deeper into that pit where everything they do is like, this is kind of cool, but you need this for it to really stand out to be what it's supposed to be. And it's getting more and more dangerous because you're also throwing in all this multiversal timeline thing that, maybe larger audiences or more mainstream audiences are not going to be able to follow as much. You're losing more and more of that sentimental value between, like Lil was talking about, what we're dealing with right now instead of, this is what's coming in the future. Loki sort of represents the shift into Marvel constantly using that property to kind of look ahead, and we're left with a series that, when you're a big fan of the cinematic universe, you understand the potentials of what just happened and you're super excited for it. But if this is just a fan who's like, yeah, I'll check out Loki, that's not going to get them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, it's just not going to happen. But it's also significant. It's a weird conversation to have, and it's going to be totally different than when we start talking about Black Widow, which is, some of the predicament that Marvel has found themselves in, right? We've talked about this a little bit in the Slack channel, and once they introduced time travel, shit kind of went out the window because there's so much that the cinematic universe can sort of collapse in on itself with, and we see that happening in Loki. Just as they're trying to get the multiverse kicked off, it's already sort of collapsing because character lines like Loki are getting sacrificed, And even Kang's introduction, where it's just 45 minutes of straight dialogue. This is necessary so that things will work in the future. And it puts us in a position where we're like, I'm cool with the decisions that were made of Loki, but I don't really want to watch it again. Like, if I'm going to go back and watch Loki the first season, I'm definitely going to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier first. That's just how it is, because I know I'm going to watch all of Loki and build up to a 45-minute explanation of a multiverse, and I get it, but like I don't need that again.
I have a problem.
I think,
on the one hand, sorry.
I was just going to briefly say, I think at some point I definitely want to sit down and binge Loki, because I want to see how it feels in one stretch. And I feel like I already know the answer, but I want to see.
I did it. It's
I'll say also, I feel like it needed a couple more episodes to breathe.
It did. Yep.
It really did.
The pacing in that series as an entire entity is absolutely fucking terrible.
Whipsaw, man.
I don't think I've ever seen anything honestly paced worse in my entire
that's not
life.
true.
Come on.
I honestly,
that's some hyperbole, but
I honestly, God, I cannot think of anything that was paced worse than this. It goes 900 miles an hour for like 4 minutes at a time, and then limps along for 20 minutes, and then you get maybe 1 minute of like a trot. The pacing on it is painstakingly bad.
See where it's for me?
I didn't hate the show, and I do have a different rant I want to go on, but the pacing of the show is terrible. It's not a good binge at all.
Interesting.
See, for me, I personally, like, I guess still enjoy it as a binge, except now with the knowledge that I'm headed sort of for just a combination of orchestra of wet fart noises and kazoo noises when I hit the final episode, and I just go
That finale is what everybody's talking about, and you had such the opportunity to kind of build up to this grand epic finale, and I think Loki was like had that potential, but you can't do that now. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has demands of its own. And this episode is sort of a representative of those types of demands, where you don't just get to do whatever you want and like have fun playing with this Loki toy, and then put it back in the toy box.
Well,
like, it doesn't work like that.
It needed to end the question of who is Loki really with a definitive statement, and we didn't get that. We didn't get that close.
But I mean, look at the weight that they gave just Loki. Like, Loki not only is following up after the whole Infinity War Endgame nonsense with time travel, they introduced the fact that there is a unified time stream that's being watched over people. They introduced the fact that a multiverse could branch out. They introduced what the ramifications of a multiverse are, and also a new big bad. And also, this is supposed to be a character-driven Loki story. Like, oh God, like, is this what the future of the cinematic universe looks like?
Like I said, it needed at least 2 more episodes to really breathe.
I don't know. I think it maybe needed 2 less episodes to breathe. But there's something that Nick said.
Well, no, I think there's something to what you're saying, because a lot of the pacing episodes are because stuff is getting rushed. A lot of the time.
Maybe, but I mean, we went from we took a very short step from where we started to where we ended.
I'd agree with that.
And there was a lot of fluff in the middle that just didn't serve anything.
Well, the train car episode is a interminably lengthy episode in terms of pacing.
Yeah.
Ish episode 3.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't know. I only really enjoyed episodes 5 and 6, and then parts of 1. And I actually really enjoyed 6 just for the acting by Majors. I thought that was just brilliant. Like, I just kept looking at Bailey.
It is hammy. He is chewing the scenery, but it is also fun.
Like, I had just 5 episodes of, oh yeah, no, we're really getting into something. And then the 6th episode was just like, by the way, like, as I said earlier, by the way, enough of that guy. Forget about that guy. Here's Kang.
And I guess like we're 30 minutes into this, so we can talk about the end credit scene, right? This is the first for the streaming series so far, to my knowledge, that with WandaVision, everybody's like, come on, what the hell with season 2? And they were pretty quick to be like, not really happening. Yeah. Falcon and Winter Soldier were pretty quick. I mean, not even a day after they released the episode, they announced that he's getting a movie. So it kind of spoiled it for everybody who didn't get to see the episode. On this one, we sit through the end credit scene, and Cody, go ahead.
No. Don't finish your thought, but this all ties into everything I've been trying to get in here.
Nice. Yeah, so we get to the end credit scene. We figure, I guess this is what's kicking off the next movies. We'll get to see all this continued on the big screen, and then a big stamp happens, and Loki's coming back for season 2. The first time for the Disney Plus series, and hell of a one to do it with.
So
go ahead. I know you're bursting at the seams.
So I'm going to expose my own hypocrisy here. With WandaVision, which I enjoyed more than I didn't. I enjoyed WandaVision, but I got to the end and I was like, man, what a missed opportunity to tie this into something bigger, to have actual ramifications come out of this. Right? Like, okay, we have Vision back, but we didn't. He's an android. I didn't really think we were ever in danger of not having Vision. We proved that Wanda is a badass. I mean, she broke an Infinity Stone with her bare hands. I think we knew that. We were good. But so it was all very self-serving. We get to Cap and Winter Soldier. That's what we called the last one, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Damn right.
Is anybody fucking surprised that Sam Wilson is Captain America? Steve gave him the shield. Like if they didn't have that show and just had Sam show up as Captain America, everything would be fine. Nobody would question it. Right? Mm-hmm. Now they gave it to us. That's cool. That's some extra. But is this serving the larger narrative? No. WandaVision serving the larger narrative other than that scroll that showed up at the end? No. So my complaints there about those shows end up also being the antithesis of my complaint about this show, that, oh man, I wish you weren't serving the larger narrative so much. Why is Loki at the end serving the TVA? Like, from the very first episode, I said, you know what would be cool if Kang shows up in this show?
Oh, shit.
Well, I think now is where we have to absolutely admit how utterly wrong I was to hypothesize that the figure in the cloaked figure was Dr. Doom. So, and that was, there was
somehow that is worse than my end credit thing. My big bad expectation, but that's also because my big bad expectation was just all of the Loki comics, and then going, okay, so the big bad is Loki. That is how this works. Like, narratively speaking, I expect Loki's big bad to be Loki because Loki's worst enemy is himself. That is how it's been for a decade of stuff. And so I was expecting the show to go, hey, this is the worst version of you. And also this version of you that is terrible and has everything you've ever wanted, this version of you who is already king of space, is actual and is basically controlling your life right now. Like, do you want to be that person? Or do you want to say, no, not for me, thanks, be someone else?
Right.
Okay, hey, Marvel, Lil is available to hire for writing shows. Feel free to hit us up anytime. The ending was right there.
Marvel, give me a comic. Just not a comic.
I mean, it's totally right. Like, that is the logical narrative ending for this show. And then they swerved into the direction that I wanted them to go to. And I'm just not happy with the way it ended. Like,
we can never be pleased.
Apparently, I cannot be pleased.
It doesn't make sense for the show that it's a part of, even though it's a thing that still needed to happen.
Right. Right. It's just
somebody had to be behind the curtain, and apparently they felt that of their two options, one which narratively made the most sense, and option B, setting up, firing the starter's pistol for the big bad of Phase 4. Well, they chose option B because I guess they got a little greedy.
Because you can bring Loki back for season 2, apparently. So
well,
that's back to what Lil said. they make money. Loki is a character that's going to bring everybody back. I don't think Falcon and Winter Soldier, now Captain America and Winter Soldier season 2, does nearly as well because, like Cody said, the whole premise of the thing is based on Steve handing him the shield, and the whole first season was him kind of reluctantly saying, I can't do that. So that's the whole precedent for the show.
Right.
It makes sense to put that into a movie. With Loki, I mean, what are you going to do? Make Loki like another big bad for like an Avengers movie or something like that? You need something like this as a place to have Loki to keep him involved. Yeah, and it makes sense. I get it. Like, I get what they're doing, but that's sort of what Marvel's falling into, right? We're used to this. We're familiar with this method of storytelling, especially through comics. Cody saying, I'm not like worried about the android dying. These are things that we can see coming. We see them falling into it. And Loki is a way for them to kind of keep that going and also keep their moneymaker a part of it. You get to plaster Loki's face on social media everywhere, once every couple years. And
what I think is hilarious is that I think Loki has become what I would call the first big example of comic book death in the MCU. Because you become a character that you can just kill and everyone will go like, so that was fake, right? Like, that's bullshit. And even Loki himself within the show is like, by the way, I can't die, don't try it. like it is boring. And so he can just casually die in episode 4 and be like, am I dead? Okay, no. Good to know. Let's keep going.
Like, it's super interesting to me that pretty much everybody fell on the same page of both liking and disliking what happened. Like, enjoying what's to come, but not why we got it or how we got it. Like, what a weird way for the show to deliver and also fail to meet expectations.
It's just odd that all 4 of us coming with variously differing perspectives all have the same are all kind of occupying the same mixed bag space. You're right.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Lou, I think I interrupted you or spoke over you, but what were you saying?
Oh no, it was that feeling that it had to suddenly take just this very hard left-hand turn in order to try to deal with something that was not necessarily this show's purview. It was not necessarily the things that this particular show needed to do in the way it did it, if it did it. And I also I ended up thinking a lot about how in the comics, Loki is very much a character who will just murder the fourth wall. Like, we'll just fight the fourth wall, we'll fight the narrator, we'll just go, anyway, this story is mine, yes, me, I am here. I am the one in control, all of you, listen up. And having no level of that, like, I was expecting God of Stories, God of Outsiders, some sort of moment of redefining of self, and then probably just breaking time because screw it, I can do that. I want another ending for me and a end for everyone else, which kind of happened, but also kind of didn't happen and didn't have enough time to happen because, again, we needed to have about 30 minutes of expositionary stuff.
But that sort of is what kicked off. I'm glad you brought up the fourth wall, because doesn't Kang immediately break the fourth wall as soon as they're entering and being like, not what you expected, right? I mean, is that not talking directly to us as audience? It also speaking to directly our concerns at this whole series.
I guess you could definitely interpret it that way.
Maybe a 3.5 wall. It's not. It's not quite the level of ripping down the narration boxes and literally just having the comic inside of the comic, which is the level that Loki is on.
Right. At the end of the day, I think ultimately the show did some cool things with the premise and set a lot of cool stuff up. And at this point, hopefully season 2 will give us the character moments that we were looking for out of season 1. Like, maybe they got the narrative weight out of the way, because I've never really considered what a season 2 of any Disney Plus Marvel series would look like. And it's sort of, I feel like I'm back to the announcement of the Loki series and being like, oh, all the stuff they could do with this, because they've recreated that now. And are they setting me up again where I'm going to be in 3 years back at this show being like, they could have done so many cool things with it? But the potential is there again, right? For a season 2, there's so many unlimited things. There's so many options they can do with it. And it feels like a chance that they could actually follow up in a meaningful way.
Now, one thing... Oh, go ahead, Lily.
There was one scene in the trailers that it will live in my memory forever now because they didn't use it in the show and I was certain they would, which was of Loki in a throne room on what is almost certainly Asgard going, ta-da, it's me! And in all of the Thor 1 regalia with onlookers on the sides, and it's like, okay, you're obviously king, but king of how much exactly?
Yeah.
And there's also some sort of a weird little moment where, like, Avengers era Loki, like, actually Avengers era, is standing in front of a mirror going, glorious. And it's like, okay, is this a timeline where you won things? Like, are there bits of, like, are we going to go exploring and see, like, oh, hey, this is what happens if you get everything you want. You don't want it. We don't do that. And so, again, having those expectations of these character moments that then are never delivered, the Marvel is going, hey, you might get these. We don't know if you'll get these. Will you ever get anything that's in a Marvel trailer? We really just
well, this is, I mean, that's stuff that may have just wound up on the cutting room floor, but at the same time, this is the same studio that deliberately filmed scenes for Infinity War for the trailer that were not in the movie.
Right.
Just to throw people off. So
killed me because it was still in a trailer that was released on Tuesday. Tuesday, it was in a trailer, and then it was not in the show when the show dropped at 1:50 in the morning on Wednesday, which I know because I stayed up for it with all of my anxiety and big breath, and then went, why am I awake? Oh, cool, it's Kang. Going to bed, I guess.
I think that's a great way to sum up our thoughts on Loki.
Well, briefly, we've talked the narrative and story aspects of Loki to death, but we have not acknowledged some of the absolutely great performance in it outside of Tom Hiddleston. I mean, Owen Wilson, really, really a subdued version of Owen Wilson, and I just loved that. Sophia DiMartino was revelatory, I thought. I was looking at her IMDb, and she hasn't done a lot. Mostly just some genre TV stuff. Just here and there at that. And I'm going to butcher her name, but Gugu Mbatha Raw as Ravonna Renslayer. Great.
Right.
And, Wunmi Mosaku had what could have been a completely thankless role as B-15 and made an impression.
Yeah,
and honestly, since we're talking about a casting, I kind of just pieced it together that we do have a reunion between Majors and Wunmi Mosaku, who was on Lovecraft Country for HBO together. Though they didn't actually share the screen in Loki, they did in Lovecraft Country.
Whereas I caught from, sadly, moment one that Tom Hiddleston and Owen Wilson were both previously together in Midnight in Paris. But, yeah, Woody Allen, who I would like to boot off the face of the earth, but
well, who wouldn't?
Still aware that the other two were in a movie. That those two were in a movie together. So
it was a strong cast, though. There were a lot of great performances, and the visuals were great. Eliath was awesome. A lot of cool stuff like that, I think, that helped me watch every episode and be like, I'm entertained by it. But between it kind of not going.
Richard E. Grant is always wonderful.
Yes.
You always love him in everything. And he's very good at just completely committing to camp. And so having him as old Loki in the old school outfit, just going, ugh.
Well, he was. I felt I had never seen him in anything before seeing him in Dispatches from Nowhere on AMC, and that entire show was absolutely brilliant. But he just nailed it. So yeah, I just watch for that dude in everything now, and I'm always excited to see him.
He's going to a film adaptation of a musical called Everybody is Talking About Jamie, which is a great musical about a teenage drag queen, and Richard E. Grant is going to be playing the drag queen mother. I can't think of the right terminology right now, but
That's awesome.
so and he looks great. He looks like he's gonna kill it, and again, just doesn't he just doesn't care. Like, he's very much like happy being this really flamboyant person, or ultimately a really ominous villain. Like, those are his two role categories, and I feel like old Loki managed to fall directly in the middle of them.
Absolutely. Glorious purpose indeed. So we've hit 45 minutes.
I know.
There's
a Black Widow movie out.
I think there's less to say about Black Widow, though. Very fun popcorn movie. Cody, I know you had some thoughts about the narrative of it and all that, because why wouldn't you? But
I honestly don't.
If I should see it this week.
So I'll try not to dive too deeply into spoilers, but I actually went into this movie expecting not a whole lot, just a mid-tier Marvel movie, and I was very happily surprised. It's fun escapism,
right?
It's got its flaws. Taskmaster was wasted. It just follows the MCU tradition of one-note villains in far too many of their movies. But
I think the villain was pretty cool in this, but ultimately what I wanted, and it ties back into what we see with Loki and where Marvel is at right now with their whole cinematic universe. We're all looking ahead. We're all looking at what's coming. They're also kind of handing down a lot of the mantles that we've seen. That's why we've got new Captain America. We're seeing a lot of that happen. So I knew going into Black Widow, A, it should have been a Phase 1 movie, and B, I need to see the passing of that mantle for me to even be interested in it. And I did not just get that. I also got a bomb-ass performance from Yelena, who I'm such a fan of from Midsummer. Oh my God, they're pulling these horror stars that I love. Get out of here, Cody. Midsummer's great. But
it should have been a Phase 2 movie, damn it, because they clearly were setting up a solo Black Widow movie in Winter Soldier, and they didn't fucking follow through. I've been holding that in for 7 years now.
Right, like everybody pretty much agrees that this movie should have happened already, and it almost is like Marvel's like, sorry, we didn't get around to this one in time. Here's a movie.
That's kind of what I feel. Why I was expecting more mid-tier is it sort of felt like an afterthought.
Right, and it turned out to be a lot of fun. There's some like problematic stuff because the Red Guardian's highly misogynist, and that didn't really translate a lot of the time. But I think
I mean, he's a drunk old Russian dude. What did you expect?
I get that we were dealing with like especially like women-led trauma, but having the Guardian there with those types of jokes felt it. I don't know. It was just not landing the way I thought it should. And I love David Harbour. I mean, hello, I'm like one of the few who was like, Hellboy was cool. I had fun with it. But
you were the one.
I was the one on Twitter, if you ever saw it.
I remember. You know, I'm just giving you shit.
But like Yelena stole that whole friggin' movie from me.
She did.
I really did not care about any other characters. I was just like, why is this not a Yelena movie already? Like, just kind of get it all out of the way so we can move on. And then we kind of did that towards the end, not to spoiler too much, but the passing of the mantle was there. And to me, that was like the biggest success of the whole movie.
Yeah, Florence Pugh was great. She really did steal the movie.
Yeah.
The number is 4, by the way. 4. Where is it? There. 4. We've had 4 female-led superhero movies from the big 2.
And Black Widow could have been the first, damn it.
Wonder Woman 84, Captain Marvel, Black Widow. All 4 of them are flashback movies. Why? Because we don't want there to be major stakes. Because we want, as a studio, to be safe and make sure that whatever happens here doesn't actually impact the current product. Because what if a female superhero movie fails? And it's stamped all over the narrative structure, the plot, the characterization of this film.
You just blew my mind insanely right there, because Captain Marvel now feels like a total red herring to avoid that trope. That's why the power level is set at like where it's at for Captain Marvel, because they're faux stakes. And I don't like how much that makes sense.
I don't like how much that makes sense.
Now thinking just casually here, that I'm guessing one of the reasons that Marvel was okay with the Loki show creators going, everyone can have a little bit of bisexuality as a treat, was that it was going to be in one of the television shows and not one of the movies. So they could see, hey, do people like this or not?
Right.
After having
Could
habitually
be a way of testing the waters. I think there's some
after habitually cutting out queer scenes from other films, including there was one apparently originally expected for Io and another one of the guards in Black Panther, and then there was actually another scene that was originally in Thor Ragnarok, in which a woman was coming out of Valkyrie's bedroom, which was just casually, by the way, she's bisexual, but instead what we got was Tessa Thompson saying on Twitter, yes, I played bisexually. And
Right.
Yeah, that's representation. And it's like, that's not like technical representation. There is nothing this here.
But and to that point, I think part of why I liked Yelena so much is they actually addressed the fact that they turned Black Widow into a male gaze character. And that was one of my favorite parts, really, is Yelena constantly makes fun of her. Yeah, she's a poser, right? Like, she's a poser. And like, in not the sense that she's a poser on the Avengers, but she poses a lot when she fights, and she does that to get the male gaze. And Yelena, like, trying to mimic that. Cool. Right? It looks cool. And like her trying to mimic that, like pulling her pants up and trying to squat down and put one arm down like she did was fucking hilarious. Like, God, I love that character, man. And seeing them kind of poke fun at themselves in that way was pretty cool. But they need to really like commit to this. And we have this as a backdrop up against Loki, which is not good, not a good look for Marvel. But it does show that they're kind of aware what they're doing, and that both makes it sting a little bit more. And also, when they do things right, like Yelena making fun of Black Widow, it stands out. So it's an odd thing, but I was happy to see that in Black Widow, because clearly the whole sex appeal thing with all of these women in cat suits was going to be an ordeal. And Yelena was the character who offset that, who kind of took it away from that direction. And I love that. Everything she brought to the movie just helped it. And I can't talk about that movie without saying like how she pretty much stole it, because there's not much else there. The whole movie felt like it was like sorry, this didn't happen first, but you're getting Yelena now.
It was a Bud Light on a summer day. Like, it was empty calories, but they were enjoyable empty calories. Like, I might pay for it later, but I mean, like, that movie is the epitome of Bud Light on a summer day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could get that.
Feel shame for drinking Bud Light on any day.
We did have a lot less to talk about Black Widow, right?
Yeah, I mean,
can I touch on one really? I'm very sorry because it is another Loki thing.
No, you're good.
Please.
We clearly have more to say about Loki.
Yeah, sadly, that is how it goes in my own personal life. Is sadly, there is more to say. But so I assume maybe that all of you may to some level be aware of the trope of kill your gaze, of bury your gaze.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the casual trope of bury your gaze, of okay, now goodbye gay character, you're dead now. And somehow the sheer irony that with Loki, technically he was already dead by the time he came out. Like, so like already pre-buried, but on the other hand has become
resurrect your gaze.
It's impossible to kill, so just is like completely unburyable gay now. That's a really odd combination of things.
Like there's no way they are clearly aware of all of the things that they're putting forth with their red herring signals, basically, with these character moments. They're not aware of like the types of thoughts that it leads you to have on these characters, and what it creates in the context that it puts them in, because it's clear that that's where they're dropping the ball. But it's like they're just trying to throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks, but they don't want to throw it too hard because it might mess up the wall. And
well, at the end of the day, they're making a product, and the product is owned by one of the biggest corporations in the entire world, and that there's shareholders and stakeholders and all that bullshit.
right.
And the odds of them, or anyone, I mean, in fairness, not just to pick on Marvel and Disney, at that level, being willing to take anything that they perceive as a risk, even though it clearly couldn't be to, us peons, pretty slim. And that's sad. And that's stupid.
It is. But there's
the throwing shit at the wall approach that you use, Nick, is their way of testing the waters and seeing what they quote unquote can get away with. Which, I mean, there's nothing to get away with. That's stupid and facile, and just ignorant. But I mean that's what you're seeing in real time.
Right. The issue is really, like, I'd love to summarize this episode because, like, going back to Cody, we really can't be pleased here. Loki was pretty slow and had too much narrative weight for the MCU and had a lot of exposition. Black Widow came too late, didn't handle enough for the MCU, and had too much action and not enough meat on its bones.
I enjoyed both.
like we want in between Loki and
we will
Black
never
Widow,
be happy. We are fanboys.
Like, we want something in between Loki and something in between Black Widow, but definitely more character drama and better character moments.
Well,
and I mean, I wonder what has filled that void.
We've nitpicked this to death about, well, more Loki than Black Widow, but I enjoyed Black Widow as a popcorn movie. Bud Light on a summer day, perfect, or Keystone, whatever. But I drink a Keystone before I drink a Bud Light. But and I enjoyed Loki predominantly for the acting and some of the set pieces, and there's good to be had. We can tear this stuff apart all day long, but we all have to agree that as fans and as lovers of these characters, and well, maybe not, and the universe. Maybe not Cody in the latter, but because he's the DC guy. But why are you even here?
You are blessed by my glorious purpose.
That was good.
Even when we're picking these things apart, there's still stuff that we enjoy. Like, we could do probably 3 hours of us destroying Rise of Skywalker, right? And it would deserve it.
I loved Rise of Skywalker. You guys are
at the end of the day, you were entertained. So, I mean,
if you needed an example on why we could go 3 hours, we've already got differences happening.
Just throw an extreme example out there. So, don't let us and our parsing of this stuff dissuade you from taking a chance if you haven't seen it, or make you think maybe you shouldn't see these things. Like, you should definitely investigate for yourself and take what you want from these things and get the fulfillment that you want. And just, hey, if we wanted to be influencers, we'd be influencers, but we're way too ugly for that.
For yourself.
Bruh, I see your hairline right now.
We're not getting into this.
I love you, man. But seriously, this has been a great show. Thank you, Lily, so much for stopping by. You are welcome back anytime to join us. Next week, I'm so excited to announce we have writer and master satirist Mark Russell joining us to talk about Fantastic Four Life Story, Billionaire Island, probably some other cool stuff too. Be
Swamp
there.
Thing.
Same time, same place. And until then, go support your local comic shop, read something cool, and above all, be good to each other, because the world's a crap place and it needs more random acts of cool. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening.